Hello friends, this is Thaddeus from Going Nerdy, and today I'm going to be reviewing the book Star Wars from a Certain Point of View. Now, this being the 40th year since A New Hope was launched, what they've done is they released this book. It is not a novel like we've seen traditionally released leading up to a movie. What this is, it is a compendium, companionship. It is 40 different stories told from the point of view of 40 different characters in and around the narrative of A New Hope. Now, a lot of these characters are characters that may have very little to do with the overall narrative. They don't really push the story along. Some of them are, however, very tangentially connected to the story. For example, there's characters the guy who fired the laser, or who wouldn't fire the laser on the escape pod of R2-D2 and C-3PO, he has a story. There's a number of stories that are like that involved in this book. And what I want to do is I want to kind of talk about why I like this book and tell you why I'm rating it the way that I do. For those of you who are interested, hands down, this is the best book that has come out so far this year. Now, that's saying a lot because we have books like Battlefront 2 with the story of Iden Versio and Inferno Squad. That was amazing. Leia was phenomenal. Even Phasma was pretty well done. There are a lot of great novels, a lot of great stories that are told. But what I liked about this book specifically was that it gave additional insight into characters in and around the galaxy. What's fun for me about the Star Wars universe, or what I like most about the Star Wars universe, is that it is more than just that original trio of characters. The eventual story, the overall story, is about more than just Luke, Leia, and Han. It is about everyone involved around this rebellion, or this empire, or this republic, or this old republic, or this new republic, and this book highlights that. It shows how the galaxy as a whole was affected by specifically the events that took place in A New Hope. And it's fascinating because it brings in parts of the story that you don't get from the movie. It brings in moments from Scarif and how Scarif affected different characters. It brought in how the rebels. It brought in how the rebels. Wow! It brought in how the rebels viewed Luke Skywalker. Now imagine sitting in that briefing room, General Dodonna's giving you his little spiel, and here's this farm boy, this blonde-haired kid who's like, no, I can do this. I got that. That's not a big deal, right? But then you have veteran rebel pilots who's like, WTF, who is this kid? It is quite possibly one of the best stories that they've really come out with. And it's because they bring in all of those different points of view. Now, I will go ahead and I will say I'm going to give this a 9.9 or a 9 out of 10. And the reason I don't give it a full 10 is because I really struggle to give anything full marks on anything. Like most stories, like most books, there were great things, there were mediocre things, there were some... Well, I don't even say there's bad things because I don't think there was anything that was flat out bad. The story, again, told 40 different stories, retold or retelling the events involving or surrounding A New Hope. The way that you can look at this is kind of like a TV show. A TV show is going to have a season, and that season is going to have a main plot or a main focus. Each individual episode may push the plot along, but it won't tell the whole story, right? Each episode most of the time is self-contained, but it has little nuggets of happenings that are important to the overall plot for the season. And that's what this book is. There's 40 different stories that, while each one kind of pushes the story along, you hear about droids, you hear about the droids and the battles and all the other stuff going on. But it's usually not told from the perspective of someone directly involved in the situation. And I really like that. And what's cool about that is it actually gives the manner of which the stories are told a unique flavor, right? Instead of having one author telling one story, you have 40 authors telling 40 different stories. Now, That kind of is cool because then if you get a bad story, there was one, and I'll talk about it in a minute, that kind of bugged me. But it was just the way that it was told. The others, because they were by different authors, they were having different focuses, different genres of writing. So there was mystery, and there was murder, and there was a heist, and there was a bunch of other random stuff. There was comedy, definitely some drama in there, and some, some very unique points of view that were told. It was cool because there was one that I didn't like, but the rest because it was new and fresh. It was a lot of fun to read or / listen to. Now, I do listen to these books on Audible. I think that is the best way to consume a Star Wars book. I love reading. I just don't have a lot of time, especially when I'm making these videos. But I do listen to them, and they're a lot of fun via the audiobook. I have an Audible subscription. Love it. I think it's great. I'll leave a link if you guys want to give it a shot later on. I do a lot of driving, and so it's great to have these books to listen to in the car. But I will go ahead now and kind of talk about what I liked about the book outside of some of the highlights, some of the story highlights, and some of the story lowlights. There was actually only one that really kind of bugged me, and that was the story of Boba Fett. Now, I'm not a huge Boba Fett fan. If I was around, if I was old enough to see Boba Fett, in the original movie, I probably wouldn't have thought anything of it. Yeah, he was cool. Yeah, he was menacing, but he was only menacing when he didn't speak. And he was only menacing when you didn't know what his intentions were. The fact that he has this just terrifying mask on makes him terrifying, makes him this crazy intense character. In the book, however, it is told entirely from his point of view. Boba Fett's story takes place with Jabba the Hutt talking to Han, saying, "Hey, Han, get the money." And he's kind of talking about what's going on. He's talking about why Vader eventually says no disintegrations. That was kind of a fun tidbit of information to figure out or to hear. But what I don't like about Boba Fett what I like about Boba Fett is the opposite of what this story did. And the story, again, it was inside his head. It was inside the mind of Boba Fett. And like all of us, he has an internal monologue, and I didn't like the monologue. I didn't like how conceited and self-righteous and kind of douchebaggery he was. I didn't care for that. What's cool, I will say, though, about the audiobook is it was read by Jon Hamm. And Jon Hamm, for those of you who don't know, is the guy from Mad Men, which he did a fine job, but just the way that the character was written, the way that it was read, that's Boba Fett, right? And if you get to know Boba Fett, at least in the Clone Wars, you kind of definitely get that sense of like, hey, I'm better than everyone. I'm awesome, so on and so forth. But I really didn't like the way that came off in this story, and it was kind of sad because again, Boba Fett, he's cool. Not my favorite character, and not a lot of people's favorite character, but like I really think that it did the character a disservice. So. But I will say that might be because my favorite part of Star Wars are the Jedi. And again, my favorite part of this book was the story that revolved around the Jedi. Now, there are 3 parts. There were 3 specific stories that I really enjoyed, and they all involved 3 different Jedi Masters. The first was Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn, or after Ben Kenobi takes Anakin and rescues him from the Tusken Raiders, and he brings him back to his shanty hut in the middle of the desert. This old man bringing a young boy back to the desert, back to his little cabana in the desert. Luke is asleep, and you get this back and forth, this discussion between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. And it's told from Qui-Gon's point of view. And so you have kind of an ethereal, I know things that you don't kind of a vibe from Qui-Gon. But you really get the sense that Obi-Wan wanted more time. He wasn't ready to train Luke. He wasn't ready to do what he had to do. He'd been training, he'd been working towards something, but he needed more time or wanted more time. And there was a kind of a level of resentment in the older Obi-Wan, which it was really interesting to see. I liked it. It showed a different side of Obi-Wan, right? And definitely really interesting because you get a back and forth between, you know, former master, current master, with Padawan, and I thought it was fascinating. I really liked it. Really well told. The second installment, or the second moment where we get a Jedi telling a story, is Obi-Wan, and it is told from his perspective as he is fighting Darth Vader. And what's interesting is, as he's fighting Darth Vader, he's actually reliving other moments in his life. And it's cool because it's the moment when he becomes one with the Force, right? We all know that moment when he tells Vader, "You know, strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can imagine," right? He gives his life to save Luke, to get the crew off the ship. But what is neat about it is it really shows. He has some flashbacks, or forcebacks, because apparently Star Wars doesn't do flashbacks, which they totally do flashbacks. But what's interesting, though, is he has a flashback where he is summoned by kind of a feeling, not necessarily, it's not a summoning from Qui-Gon, but it's the feeling of Qui-Gon, or something to that extent, where he needs to go and rescue Luke. And Luke's 2 or 3, and it's this moment where Obi-Wan says that he failed Luke. He saves him, but by saving him, Owen Lars says, no, you'll never have anything to do with him. And this is why Obi-Wan hasn't trained Luke ever, right? And it's really, really interesting. And it's, again, it kind of continues on that, like I said earlier, it continues on that story where it's like you get a moment where you get some insight into a character, like early on you did with the conversation between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And then here you get more insight between Obi-Wan and essentially the Force. And you understand that Obi-Wan felt like a failure. He really felt like he failed Luke, that he should have been more prepared for this. The fact that he held his father's lightsaber for the first time moments before, or hours or days before he was killed, he felt like that was a disservice, and that he failed his final, Jedi act, right? It also kind of talked about how he didn't feel like a Jedi. What is also cool is it brings in, there's a moment where he keeps talking, he mentions Maul, like Darth Maul, right? And for those of you who know, major spoiler alert, Darth Maul dies. But he doesn't die in episode 1. He's brought back into the Clone Wars. And in Star Wars Rebels, Obi-Wan kills Darth Maul. And it is just a really cool moment. But you see how that moment affected him. And it makes the overall story that much cooler. It was so awesome. But the final thing is the final neat thing was that it showed the transition of Obi-Wan from life to death, and what happens to the Force users, or just to us, in death. And it was super cool. Really, really loved it. But that leads me to the third story that I really, really liked, and that was a story of Yoda. Now, we all know that Yoda doesn't show up until the second movie, or the fifth movie, where Luke is told by Obi-Wan to go to Dagobah. This story takes place on Dagobah. Yoda's doing his thing, being a hermit, hanging out, and he has a visitation from an old friend, Obi-Wan, as a Force ghost. And it is interesting because as Yoda is contemplating wanting to train another Skywalker, he's talking about the Chosen One. He's thinking about the Chosen One and what she could do with the Force if she just had a mentor, a trainer, a Jedi master, a knight that she could learn from. I really think it's interesting because you have this moment where Yoda's talking to himself and thinking about just the danger that comes from Luke. He's reckless and he's angry and he's arrogant and he's impatient, and these are all of the same things that he said about Anakin. And so what's interesting to me is, as I was reading this or listening to it, I wondered how much of those things will play into Luke's future. Now, here in the next couple of days, we do get a new book that's coming out. It revolves all around the history of Luke Skywalker. I'm really excited to read it. It is a young adult book, I think. I'm not sure that it's a fully, adult novel or whatever. But I do think it's a young adult novel. But I'm interested to see how Yoda's story or Yoda's thoughts about Luke Skywalker play into who Luke is as a person and who Luke eventually becomes, and how Luke eventually trains his new generation of Jedi. Now, I'm really curious about that. That's kind of why I love these books. There were a few other really fun, really great moments in my mind that talked about this, that were really enjoyable to read. One of them was actually a story written by Wil Wheaton, or Wil Wheaton, and it is about a rebel who is going to die, right? I want to say that he was on Yavin or something like that. He's about to send his kid off, his baby child off to another planet so that child can be safe. And what he does is he makes like a video entry for his child to read later on or watch later on, and so on and so forth. And it is heart-wrenching because you hear this moment about this father who's going off. He's like, hey, I really wish that I could keep you around. I really wish that, the Empire wasn't like this. I really wish the world was better and the galaxy was better, but it's not. Hopefully what we're doing here will help you. But then, the shoe drops and he's like, but you'll enjoy your life on Alderaan. And it is this, when it's towards the end of the story where he drops that, and you've kind of, felt for the guy. You're like, oh man, that's sad. But then he's like, I'm sending you to Alderaan, and by the time you get this, you'll be there. And it's like, oh my gosh, he has no idea. And it's total irony that like we know that planet's going to get destroyed. And that's what makes it so sad. Man, it is like the most heart-wrenching moment in the entire story, or entire series of stories. Man, it was really well written. Great. I actually, gave Wil Wheaton a piece of my mind on Twitter because of it. Because man, oh my gosh, it was rough. It was really rough, but really well told. That does lead me to one of my final and one of my favorite stories. I will say that my top favorite, definitely the 3 Jedi ones, but one that was a lot of fun to read and really participate in was called Eclipse, and it was told from the perspective of Brea Organa. And what's interesting about Brea is from the original movies, we don't get a lot of information from her or about her. We know who she is, we know what she is, all that other stuff, but we don't get to know who she is as a person. Now, the book Leia that came out, I believe, in September of 2017 was a great book. Was very insightful as to her character and showed us who she was. Really set up a really cool dynamic between her and Bail, and how their raising of Leia influenced her as a person, which was great. I really liked that one. But what I loved about this one was it showed the last moments of the people of Alderaan. And it was just this powerful moment of, they're sitting there on the planet, they're worried about what's going on, they've just got news that Scarif was hit and that everything went badly, the Senate was disbanded, and all this other crap was going on. And, you know, Bail was a senator and Mon Mothma, and she's familiar with Mon Mothma, and she knows who she is, and they've worked together in the rebellion and all that other jazz. But it's this really cool moment where she and Bail connect, and it's right before the destruction. And one of the last things they see is the sun in the Alderaan system, or the Alderaanian system, being blotted out by the Death Star. Man, it is just a really powerful moment, and a really cool story too, because it gives a lot of backstory, gives a lot of character development to those characters, which then in turn we can, you know, push on Leia. And then one of my final ones that I really want to talk about and really enjoyed was Palpatine. Now, for those of you who don't know Shakespearean literature, Shakespeare wrote in iambic pentameter, which is the what light through yonder window break. It is the sun, and Juliet is the moon. It is that stressed, unstressed syllable connection. Palpatine is written from the point of view of Emperor Palpatine, or Darth Sidious, and it is a prose poem, and it is quite possibly the coolest thing that I have ever read. I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was awesome. I loved it. If I were still teaching English, I would use this in my class as an introduction to Shakespeare. It was really neat because it embodied the darkness, the terror that is Emperor Palpatine, and it really built him up to be this devious, dark menace. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was amazing. Overall, the book was phenomenal. I recommend it for each of you. Christmas is coming up. Give it a shot. It's definitely worthwhile. I'm going to actually go ahead and leave a link in the section below that will give you 1 month of free Audible subscription. If you go there and actually sign up for an Audible account, 1 month or 6 months or whatever, if you do it monthly, I do it monthly, that first month you'll actually get 2 books, right? Cancel it after the first month, totally fine. You just got 2 books for the price of 1 at a discounted rate, and you helped out the channel. With that, leave a comment in the section below. Let me know if you've read it. Let me know what parts you liked about it, what parts you didn't like about it. Let me know what books you're looking forward to this coming for the rest of the year, or what books you liked this last year, this year that's almost passed, right? Like I've always said, Star Wars is about community, and I really enjoy talking about this stuff with you guys and chatting with you on the sections below. So leave a comment, share this video, like us, subscribe. This has been Thaddeus from Going Nerdy, and as always, my friends, stay nerdy.